So good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world right now. Welcome to the InHope Expert Insights webinar about building employee resilience in trust and safety. My name is Esmeralda Schoenmakers. I'm the InHope Communication Specialist, and I'll be your MC for today. I see people are still coming in right now, but we're going to get started. So before we start, I would like to take you over some of our guidelines. As you may have noticed, the webinar will be recorded. I just started the recording. It will also be made available online afterwards, and there will be a recap available. Please be aware of your surroundings. Make sure that nobody else has access to your screen. For example, if you leave your screen or leave the room. All participants are muted and their video is disabled, so only our speakers will be unmuted, and you'll be able to see me or our speaker of today. If you have any questions, please submit them via the Q&A function, and we'll go over them at the end of the presentation. And yeah, let's get started. I would like to introduce you to Jean Claffey from TaskUs. Jean is the Senior Manager for the Wellness and Resiliency Department at TaskUs in the locations in the US, Mexico, Colombia, and Europe. She utilizes over 25 years of clinical mental health expertise to build and manage effective interventions to ensure psychological safety for trust and safety professionals. So without further ado, Jean, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So great to be here with you all. Thank you for having me. So today I'm going to share with you some ideas for best practices for ensuring employee well-being and trust and safety. And at the end, we'll do a short wellness activity together. So let's jump right in. The next slide, please. I'm sure you've all seen news articles such as these. There's just an abundance of information that highlights potential psychological risks and actual harm to trust and safety workers. So you may have also seen the litigation, again, associated with the harm experienced by content moderators over the last couple of years. So along with the risk to employees, there are risks to organizations also. So without proper support, the organizations themselves can see a rise in absenteeism, poor performance, attrition, declining reputation, just to name a few, right? So next slide. So how do we build employee resilience? And the answer is really pretty simple: by establishing comprehensive and proactive wellness programs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Next slide. A lot of people wonder if the investment in wellness programming is really worth it. And we have found that employees with wellness programming maintain high resiliency scores and maintain a level of protection from psychological harm and burnout. Aside from the benefits to employees doing trust and safety work, there's also a positive impact on business outcomes. We found that people who participate in wellness programming had a 4% improvement in KPIs, 8% increase in accuracy, and attrition was reduced by half. So, ultimately, resilient employees lead to safer platforms, and in our context here, safer users and safety for children. So next slide, please. So today I'm going to share some tips for embedding wellness throughout the entire employee life cycle. And there's a few things to keep in mind when setting up programming. First and foremost, it's really important to invest in clinician-led wellness teams who have specific expertise in trauma. Oftentimes, wellness programs are led by operations or HR benefits, and they may not have the expertise to create evidence-based clinical interventions that actually protect the brain from the trauma response, which is the risk in trust and safety work. So I'll talk also about a preventative approach versus reactive programming and the importance of ensuring a variety of wellness offerings. So if you work in a global organization, keep in mind that culture matters. One size doesn't fit all for mental health programming, excuse me. So investing in local providers really can ensure cultural competence, and it avoids us imparting our westernized ideas that may not fit for other cultures. So next slide, please. So we're going to look here at some options for embedding programming through the full life cycle of the employee experience. And it's important to note too that interdepartmental collaboration is key to success here. So you may want to consider creating standard operating procedures with the departments involved in each stage. And again, this leads to consistency in your programming and then continued evolution of the offerings that you're giving. All right, so let's give the first click here. We don't want anyone to be surprised by this work. So before a candidate ever speaks to HR, they should see a transparent job description, right? Clearly stating the duties of the job and the type of content involved. So it's not enough to say you may be exposed to graphic content, because that can mean many different things to different people. So a more specific example of job description language might be, as part of your job functions, you may be exposed to hate speech, violence, sexual assault and abuse, gore, whatever the specific content is, for up to X hours per day. And here, this is also a great place to describe any wellness programming you might have to offer to mitigate the risks involved in this work. So at the pre-hire stage, we also use pre-hire assessments that are non-diagnostic, and it's just an evaluation to help determine if candidates have inherent resiliency traits and to give candidates the option to opt out via questions about their willingness and ability to work, X amount of hours per day on content. And these assessments aren't exclusionary for employment. They're really just guides for recruiters and operations to place the most resilient candidates in trust and safety work. And there's many validated assessments available, such as Connor-Davidson Resiliency Scale, Adult Resilience Scale, et cetera. And those are all typically available for purchase for use. So on to onboarding. At this stage, we really want to equip our employees with tools to effectively navigate the natural responses to content moderation before they're even exposed to any graphic or disturbing material. So while they're in training, we want to introduce the concepts of resiliency, brain health, and how it relates to their job specifically. And so ideally, your wellness team should be teaching and having the trainees practice the skills that are going to optimize their brain for peak functioning. So next, on to the employment phase. And as you can guess, the bulk of wellness initiatives will occur in the active employment phase. So depending on the type of work that's involved, you may want to consider having an on-site or even virtual counselor or coach check in with workers, right? That keeps the wellness team aware of individual or team concerns. This allows for quicker intervention and gives workers easy access to the services and knowledge of the team. And again, this is all aimed at promoting a culture of wellness. So providing and even requiring recurring skill acquisition groups where these employees learn and experience the skills that research shows us bolsters brain health week over week or biweekly, monthly, depending on your setup, right? This all keeps the brain healthy and resilient, meaning that when stress is encountered, employees are more likely to self-regulate using the skills they've already practiced, right? It's like muscle memory. And that results in less reactive care and fewer psychological injuries. Some wellness programs are or have been essentially free time, right? Where employees have a break from the work, which often means hanging out with their friends, playing ping pong, right? Things like that. And all of those activities are beneficial to well-being. However, they might not be targeting or preventing the specific risk of injury related to trust and safety work. So if you think of other first responders, they practice techniques to keep themselves safe and accomplish the job at hand. And they do this over and over and over. And as a result, then, they can respond quickly and appropriately to any hazards that are associated with their profession, right? I've been talking a lot about preventative care, but it's also important to have that the employees have access to reactive care, meaning if someone is already in distress of some sort and they reach out for an intervention. And again, this can be accomplished via on-site counselors or coaches, contracting with a vendor that provides clinical services, and or even a robust employee assistance program available. Now, wellness really applies to all levels of an organization, right? So providing leadership training and encouraging participation in wellness programs from leaders and other key stakeholders really reinforces and normalizes attending to and strengthening our mental health. And no surprise here, but resilient leaders tend to have resilient teams. There's also a lot of benefit to designing your facilities, keeping neurochemistry in mind. We all know that having physical fitness areas, recreation options, a quiet space, those are all important, but you can also impact employee well-being through lighting, use of specific color schemes, optimizing your sound levels, etc. Digitized wellness offerings during the employment phase are also a great resource to build wellness into the everyday life of your employees. If you have a learning management system, you can house webinars or short skill videos, recorded meditations, etc. All these are things that are available on demand whenever an employee wants it. You may also consider using technology as another innovative way to foster wellness. So things like virtual reality headsets for immersive meditations, biofeedback machines, even certain visual spatial games that we know now can interrupt the storage of graphic material into long-term memory. So also in the employment phase, you may want to create a process for workers to move out of egregious work. So you could think of this as you would a physical injury, right? If somebody is working in a factory and they get injured doing a specific job, you would move that person away from that job immediately, right? Ensure they have access to care for the injury, and then find a job that will not create additional injury. So same for psychological injury. And depending on your company policy, this may also involve filing workers' compensation claim or an ADA accommodation. So next, please. Aside from this programming that was highly specific for trust and safety workers, supplemental programming that addresses a myriad of issues that apply to all employees, regardless of their job duties, is really a best practice also. And you'll want to consider having effective risk management protocol and a crisis management plan in place that leaders, again, and all employees are familiar with. And we think maybe of crises can be something like suicidal ideation, death of a coworker, on-site violence, natural disasters, things like that. So you want to have protocols in place to address that. And then there's often behavioral and emotional signs that someone is struggling with a behavioral health issue. And being able to notice these signs early, and then also knowing where to direct the employees for further assistance is really critical. So perhaps having a chart, right, that outlines the different levels of risk, behavioral signs to watch for, and then how to respond appropriately to each risk level. So another possible offering is outreach programming. with the goal of creating a community that's safe for all employees, right? We want to raise awareness about psychological issues and social issues that impact all of our employees. And some topics to cover might be domestic violence prevention, financial wellness, alcohol and drug abuse awareness and resources, suicide prevention, those kind of things. So next, please. Investing in research and data collection can yield valuable insights into the health of your employees. And again, as we saw earlier, can show the impact of wellness programming on business outcomes and metrics, right? And we're always looking at our research and our data to ensure that we're guiding future programming in a way that makes sense and is most effective for our population. And if you think about it, trust and safety is still a relatively new field. And the more contributions we have to study and improve employee safety, the better for all trust and safety workers, right, in the industry. So finally, let's consider post-employment care. Most companies have an exit interview for their employees with questions about, the impact of their job, what influenced their decision to leave, but then what? So if someone indicates they're leaving the job because the job caused them harm or distress, do we have some obligation to provide assistance? I think so. So often employee assistance programs will offer up to 12 months of post-employment care, or if appropriate, your on-site wellness team may continue services if the counselor or coach determines it's appropriate. So, wow, that's a lot, right? Of course, it might not be possible to implement every suggestion at every stage of employment, depending on your company's resources, size, type of work, et cetera. However, I just wanted to kind of emphasize and highlight the importance of embedding wellness into the day-to-day life. And layering these interventions and offering a variety of options will have a far better impact and outcome than offering just one option that may not be suitable or impactful for everyone. So before we jump into our interactive taste of wellness, I'll pause here for any comments or questions that maybe I could answer, anything that comes up for anybody.
Hi, sorry, Dean. I did have one question. You made a specific reference to visual interactive materials that disrupt long-term memory, and I wanted to understand a bit more about that.
Yes, actually, there's been quite a bit of research over the past maybe 10 years or so. The most popular game that most people think of is Tetris. It's a visual spatial game where you're manipulating different shapes in their environment. And they've done a lot of research on that. And they've found that within 6 hours of exposure to something graphic, which could be, graphic content in trust and safety work, if the employee or person plays that game for at least 10 minutes, it does something to interrupt the storage of what they have seen into long-term memory. And there's some other, games like that that you can utilize. But again, Tetris is the one that's the most popular. And of course, people like to do that. So, they're protecting their brain and having a little fun at the same time.
Thank you for that example. I was very curious.
Sure.
There's also more questions, but I'll leave this to Esmeralda.
Yeah, I see them coming in. I see 2 questions actually from Camilla Williams. Have you seen a difference in engagement between mandating training group skill programs or recommending employees attend those trainings?
Yeah, Excellent, excellent question. And I see the second one also, is there a risk to mandating participation? Yeah, beautiful question. And actually what we have found, we used to offer, different options that people could use during their wellness time. When the pandemic started, actually, was when we made the switch to soft require engagement in these skill building groups. And we got a little pushback at first, of course, but what we found pretty quickly, that attendance improved to almost 100% to the training, skills training sessions. And we found that people were really engaged and enjoying it, which of course led to better outcomes, less reactive care. And we thought a lot about the risk of mandating participation, but here's how we kind of conceptualize that we are not mandating people into therapy, which of course would be unethical, right? So these sessions are not therapeutic processing kind of things. They are very much focused on experiential learning that causes real-time protective change in the brain, right? Week over week. And so we think about it also kind of like I mentioned with, other first responders, that, this is almost on-the-job training we consider, and it's something different than we're going to make you go to therapy, right? And the employees are paid during this time, during their wellness sessions. So, great question, but we've actually seen a really positive impact from soft mandating.
Okay, thank you for your elaborate answer, Dean. Very clear. I don't see any other questions coming in at the moment, so if you like, we can continue.
Yes,
I'll turn off my camera again. Leave it to you.
All right, perfect. All right, so there's been a lot of research over the last few decades on brain functioning, right? And how we can all change the function and actually the structure of our brains. We used to think that after about age 25 that the brain was pretty much set. But now we know that's not true, thankfully. So let's experience two pretty simple ways to change our brains, right? The area of our brain that operates automatically, right, where our thoughts and emotions live, responds really well to imagery and symbols. So let's start with some imagery. There was a time when you were out in nature and the scenery was so amazing and beautiful that you could hardly even believe it was true or that it was real. So allow your mind to bring up an image of this scene that you have witnessed out in nature. Can you see the colors? Are there any sounds that come to mind? Can you imagine the temperature that maybe you were feeling at the moment you saw this amazing scene? What were you experiencing at that moment? Maybe drop it in the chat. People oftentimes say they were experiencing peace. Oh, yes, Abby, beautiful. What else? Energy, maybe connection, calmness. Absolutely beautiful. Yes. So I believe that at that moment, your awareness was turned inward to where at your core, you are peaceful, wise, calm, connected, right? The real you, if you will. So not your thoughts or your emotions, but you, at your very center, at your very best, clear, focused, aware. So just experience that for a few more seconds. So I believe also that oftentimes our awareness is pulled away from that experience of the real us by work or our partner, school, money, deadlines, etc. Right? The list goes on and on. However, the real you is always there, never goes away, can't be turned off. If you were outside on a rainy day and a child said to you, "Oh no, the sun is gone," you would say, "Oh, the sun is still as brilliant and beautiful and hot and brilliant as it always is. It's just temporarily out of our awareness." So the real you, that amazing energy, right, that shines through you and from you out into the universe is always as bright and peaceful and connected and wise as you experienced out in nature. So now what we've done, we've just connected your image from nature to the real you. You at your very best, your highest intention, if you will. Can you imagine moving around in your day, experiencing that? Right? Wouldn't that be lovely? So if you have an extra 3 seconds in your day, just pull this scene up and enjoy it. And each time you do this, your brain now says, "Oh, yes, hello, me. Here I am." Calm, focused, connected, peaceful. Right? Attending to what there is to attend to. Our brains sometimes trick us by imagery or thoughts about the things that previously happened or things that may happen in the future but haven't happened yet. And because our brain doesn't really understand the difference between past, present, or past and future. So if we're thinking about something, our brains tend to react as if that thing is happening. And it sends signals to our body to get us to do something, right? And so that's why sometimes we feel jittery or like we have to get out of some place, right? But we're like, gosh, nothing's really happening right now that I need to run from. So just like our brain can hack us, using techniques like this, you can hack your own brain and reset it, right, to this calm, optimal functioning state. Make sense? Good. All right, so next slide, please.
Jean,
Oh.
I didn't want to interrupt the exercise, but I see a question coming in from Michelle Chang, who says, is there a way to accommodate people with aphantasia who have trouble imagining images? Can they do this exercise as well?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We haven't really looked into that specifically, but I think with more guidance, people with aphantasia, you can guide them a little more. Like, you may have noticed I said, what colors do you see? And even having someone just verbalize that, right? Like, hey, do you have a memory? Tell me where you were, right? Was there a waterfall? Was there a mountain? It can kind of spark some of those things and again, have some impact on the brain. Great question. And I wish I had a more scientific research-based answer for that, but I think this is a field that people are, or an issue that people are becoming more interested in. In fact, I just talked to someone the other day on my team that wants to do some research on this. So maybe in the future, I'll have a great answer for you. Interesting.
Okay, I see some other questions as well, but I leave them for later in the presentation and just continue with the next slide.
Sure. All right. So now, if you want to take this exercise we just did to the advanced level, let's add a symbol. We know, our brains respond to and recognize symbols, in just a nanosecond, right? So what is this one here on the top left? What is this symbol? Twitter, right? How about the one next to it? Meta. How about the one under? Google. Yeah, exactly. So our brains automatically interpret that symbol to mean something, right? Nobody said, oh, it's a light blue circle with what looks like a little bird chirping in it. And nobody said, oh, it's like a 3/4 circle with 4 different colors and a line on it, right? Our brains immediately go to what that symbol means, right? So let me see here. So now that we've found the real you, right? When we did the image exercise, let your mind pick a wild animal or a wild bird that represents you or symbolizes you at that highest intention, right? Intention. You moving around the world with clarity and wisdom and creativity. Just let your brain pick something, right? Whatever shows up is usually exactly the right symbol. So will anyone share their symbol in the chat for us? What came up for you? Tiger, peacock. Could it be a plant? Absolutely. A fern, orca, eagle. Oh my gosh, I love these. Yes. And hopefully you noticed it kind of just popped right in for you, right? So there's some connection in your brain to this animal or plant, right? Or hippo. I love that. Yes. So strong and graceful in the water. Beautiful. Yes. So if you think about some of these symbols that came up, right? Let's see, tiger. What is a tiger thinking about when he's out in the wild with his tiger family? He is thinking about eating, protecting his family, focused on what there is to do, right? Tigers don't worry about what happened yesterday. They're not worried about what's going to happen next week or what anybody thinks about them, right? Beautiful. Eagle, that's another great one that I love. Eagles are very majestic, right? And if you see them out and about, they exert the energy when they need to for flying, and they know when to coast, right? And just kind of ride the air, right? Again, focused on what there is to do, what's in front of them with clarity and purpose, right? So now that you have this image you can pull up, you have an extra 3 seconds besides the other 3 seconds, right? Pull up your symbol, right? Look at it. Look at it in the eyes or in the leaves, as the fern might be, right? And every time you are looking at that symbol, your brain says, yep, here we are, focused and calm and clear, right? Aware of what there is to do, not consumed with any other thing, right? Beautiful. So anyone want to share what that was like for you? Do you think this is helpful, pretty easy, quick brain hack to do, and nobody will even know that you're, optimizing your brain? Quick and surprisingly efficient. Yeah. So I encourage people also, we're all stuck behind our computers for hours and hours every day, right? Find a picture of your symbol, or maybe you took a picture of this place out in nature, put it on your desktop, right? Have that right in front of you. So you can access that, and again, keep pulling your attention back to the real you, right? That's where we want to keep our awareness. Beautiful. Let's see if I can read some more of these checks. Reminds me, when I program my brain to hold a crystal in my pocket. Yes. Remember what I wanted to do. Feel like drawing a deep breath to calm down. Beautiful. Yes. I love that. Insightful and surprising. Yeah, our brains are really amazing, right? And if we can use some of these newer techniques for brain change, which is just, neuroplasticity, where we can be surprisingly effective at making the changes and keeping us out of that fight or flight response, which happens to all of us, of course. So those were just two really quick activities. I can imagine swimming and floating in the cold, open, calm ocean as an orca. Lovely. Like, I can even feel it, right? How beautiful. I love it. Good. All right. So there we go. We got through it all. Anybody have questions, more comments?
Yes.
Yeah.
We had some questions in the chat that we left for at the end of the presentation, so we can go over those.
Yeah.
And if anyone else has any other questions for Jean, please put them in the Q&A right now so we can address them. There were some questions about the training sessions, the soft approach training sessions that you offer instead of conventional therapy sessions. If you could give some examples of those.
Yes, absolutely. The one that comes to mind first and foremost is one that our employees really, really enjoy. We have so much research on the impact to our brain from music, for example. So we know that different waves of music, alpha waves, theta, beta, delta, have different impacts on the brain, right? So some can be energizing, some can be calming and soothing. So in some of these skill building sessions, instead of just saying, hey, music is really important for your brain, and this is what, alpha waves do, the employees are actually experiencing the impact of music on their brain, right? So we put together programming that highlights the different waves, and the employees are listening to that. They're testing it out, over their weeks. We have a full month of programming, right, on this one particular topic. So, we also know that drumming, for instance, has a big impact on the brain, right? The rhythmic drumming. And so we encourage people to bring, a hand that you can do some drumming with us, right? And so all of these things, week over week or bi-weekly, monthly, whatever, is in real time changing the brain to be more protective and resilient. And I think I mentioned earlier too that, what we find that we have reduced requests for reactive care because the employees have like this muscle memory that their brains already are programmed. That sounds a little creepy. I don't mean it programmed like that, but they're conditioned, right, to go towards optimal functioning because we're reinforcing that week over week after week.
That's so interesting. I never knew drumming had that effect on people.
Yeah.
Crazy. Is that why my children drum so much, perhaps, on everything?
Yes, quite possibly. Possibly.
They're onto something.
Yes.
Is there a list of wellness activities or practices that we could offer to our employees?
Yeah, I would say, you know, there's tons of information on brain health and wellness activities that you can find online. You know, perhaps I can put together something and share that with Esmeralda, that might be helpful for
Yep,
some things that you could try.
that would be amazing, I think.
Yeah, oh, I'd love
Yeah.
to do that.
A question from Camilla. Are peer support groups a recommended supplemental resource, and is there any data on its effectiveness?
Yeah, so our programming doesn't specifically use peer group, but we do have some initiatives where we've kind of trained other employees to be what we call resiliency ambassadors, or you know, wellness heroes, where we're giving them a little more advanced knowledge of the resources that are available, you know, on site, out in the community. You know, again, teaching them, you know, lower risk level kind of interventions, like if you see somebody, you know, XYZ, here's what you can do, and direct them. So they're not, you know, these employees are not providing coaching or counseling, but they're more like, hey, you know, I can talk to this person because they're going to know where to send me. Right. So outside of our department, we do have what we call employee resource groups. That's kind of what you're talking about, right? It's peer-led groups that again try to focus on you know, things that may cause some inequity or has some social impact on the work we're doing. But that's really kind of outside of what we're doing, which is mostly geared for content moderation, you know, trust and safety kind of work. But we're expanding, which is really good.
Okay, I have many more questions coming in.
Yeah.
Can we find a pre-hire assessment anywhere?
Yes,
Available?
actually, yeah, you can just Google it. The Connor Davidson RAND, or Connor Davidson Resiliency Skill, is one. You can look on like some of the, you know, APA or other psychological websites. They have some of these screeners that you can purchase for use. And that comes along with, you know, how to score them, how to interpret the results. But again, these are all non-diagnostic. So you're not, you know, saying anyone has anxiety or, you know, anything like that. So yeah, there's lots of different kinds available out there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about if there is more information available about the visual spatial games, like some examples or where they can be found, and also on how to implement them.
Yeah, so this one I think is pretty exciting for me because it's so easy, right? And people like to play games. And so, you know, a quick search, you know, research on visual spatial games will bring up lots of examples, and Tetris will probably be at the top of the list. I think that's the one that's been most looked at. And again, the structures of the brain and the skills needed to manipulate those visual spatial kind of blocks and everything has some impact, right, on interrupting that storage of graphic material into long-term memory. It's not magic, like it doesn't make you forget things or, you know, erase your memory, but it just doesn't store in long-term memory like some very egregious or graphic content will, right? Because like I mentioned, that has a very high impact on our brain. So even looking at or hearing or watching a video can trigger our brain to think that that thing is actually happening, right? And then again, tries to get us to do something to stop it, which we can't, right? So those kind of things just, again, are protective factors. So the brain doesn't get stuck with those images and, you know, content in long-term memory.
Okay, Um, I have a question from someone from Child Focus in Belgium, Charlotte. She's asking if you can indicate maybe organizations that organize these kinds of sessions in Europe or preferably Belgium, like TaskUs does. And also the question if there are any partners here in Belgium that could guide them with the offering of these kind of sessions, you'd like to know.
Yeah, I don't know specifically about other organizations. I know we do have some footprint in Europe, so we're doing this work there now, and we're getting to the point where we're actually offering some consulting for other organizations. I don't want to use this as a platform for that, to do that, but I'm sure that we can point you in the right direction to find some help.
If needed, Charlotte, I'll connect you and Jean after the webinar. Another question, what's your opinion on group therapy sessions for employees who are exposed to CSAM?
Yeah, we are actually just now starting to put together some content for sessions specific to CSAM and other types of egregious work. So the interesting thing is there's not a whole lot of research yet on, what specific interventions are best used with CSAM work, or, what's best used with hate speech. But those are things that we're always looking at and building more and more material that may be beneficial to address those specific types of content. I think what we have found, though, even with CSAM, there's different levels of programming and wellness offerings. So the more egregious the content or the more impactful to the employees, the higher level of intervention we're going to have, right? So we do have on-site counselors who will do, pre and post shift debriefs for people working on CSAM, or they have more minutes of wellness per week, perhaps. We make suggestions also for, max working hours on CSAM, or how do you build in breaks from CSAM? How do you make this work more predictable for the people working on these types of this type of content, right? But we still have found that by using this very proactive preventative method, right, that we see improvements on all different types of content, including CSAM, right?
Okay, thank you. So many questions, Jean. Another one, what are your thoughts on the trade-offs between increasing employee compensation versus funding corporate wellness programming, maybe similar to free time versus structured programs?
Yeah. My answer is probably going to be quite biased, right? Because I'm in the wellness space here, yeah, and have seen specifically the benefits, right? Giving someone more money may be a motivator and impactful for continuing to do this work. But I think, again, if we think about all the media that we've seen about psychological harm and, companies ending up, litigating and settling for millions and millions of dollars, right? Maybe there's a kind of a happy medium in there somewhere, right? Like that you can, structure your pay according to, the type of work that's being done. But again, because I'm super biased, so I'm like, put your money into wellness, right? We want to keep people healthy. But I totally understand the question. Yeah. And on everyone's mind now is attrition, right? And how do we keep our employees? How do we keep them happy at work? All those kind of things. Good question.
Have you noticed any differences on the preference or efficiency of wellness activities depending on gender?
Have not. No, yeah, I'm trying to think of like participation information we get on our wellness surveys. I don't really think I have noticed a difference, depending on gender.
Okay,
Not
good to know. What else? I have one from Claire. What activities are advised with scientific backing to help COMOs transition from work to home? It's often noticed that content can be taken home with us.
Yeah, great question. Yes. So establishing routines, I think, is very important. Things like, we put a lot of things together when the pandemic was happening, right? We're kind of scrambling to like, how do we figure all this out? What do we do? Our routines are messed up. But, simple things like when you're finished with your work, you close your computer and you do your work in a different, if you're at home already, you do your work in a spot that's designated for work, right? And when the work is done, you leave that space. And then even just having other rituals, I think that sometimes might seem kind of silly, but they can work. Like I have a mug that I use for my coffee when I'm working, but I have a different mug that I use on the weekend, right? And I have my designated office space, and if I'm not working, I don't come in here unless I have to, right? So just creating small routines and differences between work and home life, and also just knowing what you need, right? Some people might say, gosh, this was a really hard day for me. I need 20 minutes to wind down all by myself, like no kids coming at me. I don't want my partner to ask me how things were. I just need 20 minutes and then, I'm refreshed. Or someone might say, what, this is a really tough day. And if I talk about this with you right now, it's going to make me feel better. Right. So it's almost like creating your own personal wellness plan, right?
Yeah.
So you yourself can separate from this kind of work. And again, if your company offers it, or if you find things online that enhance your own wellness, make that a part of your routine.
Yeah. How can a company support their employees in designing a personal wellness plan? Can you make it mandatory, maybe even, or would that work?
Creating a wellness plan is actually something that we have all of our employees do as part of the skill building group. It's one of the themes that we work with a lot is creating safety, because we know people who experience trauma often lack a sense of safety, right? So as part of that theme, we are having people get very personal and create their own wellness plan, or sometimes we also create work manuals that you share with your family that says, this is what I need when I'm finished with work. Here's what I need while I'm at work. Here's my plan for the weekends. Here's the things that bring me joy. So it's in front of them, and always kind of reminding them of what they know personally will enhance their own well-being.
Yeah. How do you convince employees to implement wellness programs if they don't believe in the importance of wellness?
Yes, really good question, right? So part of our strategy also was the groups that we do, very thoughtfully making them interactive and engaging for the employees, so it doesn't feel like someone's being mandated to go to therapy. One, because we would never do that. Two, therapy is not right for everybody, right? But again, using these more creative methods, like listening to music and drumming, or coming to a skills group and playing a game, right? And again, it may seem like, wow, this is really fun, but everything is very intentional and backed with research on brain plasticity, right? And so it's almost, I don't really want to say this, but it's almost like you can trick the employees to improving their well-being while they're having fun, right? And learning things. So, like I said, when we went to this kind of quasi-mandated group sessions, we got some pushback at first. And now what we find when people are unable to come to these groups, they are scrambling to find a way to make it up. Like, hey, can I join so-and-so's group because I was out last week and I didn't, get to participate. So there's probably a learning curve and maybe could be a bumpy start, right? But I think once employees start to feel better, they're more likely to just recognize the importance and keep going.
Yep. We're almost out of time, but I just got another question. What's the scope of your program? How many clinicians, I hope I pronounced that right, leading skills groups for how many employees?
Yeah, great question. So in the States, in the United States, we have licensed clinicians on staff, and typically the ratio is about 1 clinician to 100 employees. When the content is more egregious, we oftentimes bump that down maybe to 1 to 75. In other geos, we have life coaches that are on site to provide, the skills building group, life coaching. And then we also have vendors and an EAP program that in those other areas can provide the clinical interventions. And a lot of that is just based on availability of mental health professionals in some of the other geos that we serve, right? It's easier to find clinicians in the States than it is elsewhere. So yeah, we try to keep it right to about 1 to 100, and our clinicians and coaches can offer anywhere from 5 to 8 groups every week.
Great, thank you. I think that was the last question. I want to thank you, Jean, for your very interesting presentation and for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, I want to thank you all for being here today. Oh, I see someone in the chat saying something. They're complimenting you, of course. Our next Expert Insights okay, let me do that again. Our next Expert Insights webinar will be on April 20th, and we'll have guest speaker Serena Tomasino from the End Violence Against Children and Daniel Cardefeld-Winter from UNICEF. And they'll be talking about data for change, listening to the voices of children about their experiences online. And we'd love to welcome you to that webinar as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jean. And see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.